And it is my pleasure now to introduce Mike Vitek, Ed Opie, and Bodhi Zangline, all in systems engineering at Sandalwood. And they're going to showcase their experience working with AurosKS for the past year. So take it away.
Thanks, Amy. Yeah, once again, my name is Mike Vitek, and I'm the Director for Systems Engineering here at Sandalwood. We are actually very new to the Oros family. It's been about 12 months since we really started our journey, and I'd like to thank Jeff and Josh and all the folks there for helping us out and getting us going. We are really going to talk about how some of our early startup issues, some of the things that we've uncovered as a result of using Oros, and how it's actually made us a much better company as a result. So I think Ed is paddling. Yeah. So I'm going to cover really the first part. I'm going to transfer over to Ed, who's going to cover a bit about how Oros has changed the way we do business. Bodhi is going to cover a couple of the use cases that we have, both for ourselves and our clients, and then we'll take all your questions at the end. So a little bit about what Sandalwood is. We're a professional services firm, and it's always very difficult to kind of talk about what we do. But basically what we do is we assist companies along their digital journey. So we help them with virtual assembly tools, digital human models, the use of simulation methods and the like. We're getting into the AR, VR space. And of course, we've always been a proponent and supporter of Oros at one of our main clients, which is Ford. We were actually born in the 1980s, actually out of Ford. We actually share that birthplace with Oros itself. So both of us came from what was then called Alpha, or the Advanced Manufacturing Technology division of Ford. We've actually grown quite a bit. So I was familiar with Sandalwood in my first iteration with them in the early 90s, for those of you that were born then. Then I left Sandalwood, and Sandalwood became a primary supplier of mine when I was at Daimler or Mercedes. And then in the aughts, or just late teens, I rejoined Sandalwood as the director here. And I've seen them grow from, I was employee number 5 to now there are over 150 people operating in 3 countries, working with various software partners, and the business has completely changed. And what we're going to talk about today is why we needed Oros and why it worked for us, and kind of some of the things that we learned along the way. So everyone who's gone through at least kind of the startup phase of a company knows that you get a lot of growing pains, especially when you're growing from what I call a very small, localized operation to an international firm. So some of the things that we faced, just besides the growth, was COVID, right? So basically COVID drove us to work remotely. Our clients were actually working remotely as well. So we had to come up with a way to do business. We were onboarding a sales team at that point. So we needed to integrate them into our business. We were also partnering with a lot of different companies at that point, software firms and the like, and trying to get them integrated to our business. And we had to do all that while stretching our back office and our front office services. So Oros seemed to be kind of the right way to go. But let's talk about some of those core elements, right? So when we went through our processes and tried to understand kind of what we had to address, the first thing was that we had very inconsistent methods. So basically we operated on 3 business lines, and knowledge in and of itself, and the way you guys have talked about it over the past couple of days, was different, right? How it was gathered, how it was tagged, right? How it was stored, and how it was transferred between the different groups, all done differently between the different business lines. Likewise, as we were growing and bringing people on board, it was just a very disparate process and very troublesome process in terms of how we did that. We did it very inconsistently, and that transpired not just with our employees, but also our partners and even our customers. We had to address a lot of process issues. We had a lot of informality, right, associated with how we did things. So business development, especially in bringing a sales team on. We had no method for doing like what we call a typical sales funnel, how we reached out to social media and to the greater community itself, how we even did legal document reviews, and how we managed to kind of onboard customers from a financial aspect, all done differently and all done very inconsistently. And Likewise, as we were trying to grow, we thought it was very important to gain customer feedback. That too was also inconsistent and not handled or captured in a centralized way. And then finally, our core method one, how we do business, which is called project realization, we recognized quite painfully that it was done very inconsistently, project to project, customer to customer, business line to business line. So we had to address all those issues. What Oros has done for us over the past 12 months is really allowed us to kind of repair some of those areas that we felt needed to be kind of massaged or band-aided, but it also helped us build up our immunity, right? So we were actually able to use it to kind of strengthen some of the things that we really do well, whether it be managing processes or securing information or allowing us to collaborate with both our customers, our partners, and our employees. So this is what we're going to talk about, and Ed's going to cover some of this stuff, right? But what we've used Oros for is maybe a bit different than what some of the other people that have spoken prior to me have used it. But very first thing we used Oros for was to interrogate our processes. Basically, the ability Oros offered us to visualize kind of how we were doing things. And I've heard it talked about in some of the previous sessions that until you kind of get it in paper or get it in the system and understand kind of how things work or how things don't work, you don't see it until you actually can look at it and kind of interrogate it. So it was very powerful for us to be able to use Oros to do that. Likewise, once we had the processes or assessments or knowledge packets kind of visualized, we were able to simplify, meaning that we could talk amongst the groups and understand maybe what could be done, what could be rationalized, and maybe how could we actually maybe do it in a much simpler way. Likewise, that conversation led to conversations about how might we commonize aspects of what we do, right? So Oros very much helped us look at, recognize, or made us recognize at least that we weren't so different, that we were actually able to do things the same way, if not exactly, but enough to where we could actually programmatically insert it into a tool like Oros. And then finally, over the last, I would say, couple months or so, we've actually been able to kind of harmonize some of our core processes, which has been very exciting for those of us that have seen it grow from almost being nothing and kind of in the storming stages to where we're actually able to kind of harmonize and move forward. So very exciting aspect. A key lesson, and I'm going to talk a little bit about this later, is that, what we learned early on is that we needed to use AurosKS where it was best served, right? We couldn't use it for everything. It wasn't right for everything just because it wasn't right for us. But as an example, we tried very hard to put all of our project realization, our method one, into Oros, and it didn't work, right? Because everyone wanted to operate a bit differently. Some people wanted to use traditional methods. Some people wanted to use agile. We just couldn't get the right people engaged and everyone on the same footing. So what we did commonize, though, was how we initialize all our projects and how we close them. We did get them to agree to do that. And Oros was very helpful in getting us to understand that was possible. Likewise, we were able to commonize our customer feedback, right? So basically now everything that we get back, coming back from the customer in terms of how our people are doing, how our projects and how our approach is working with them is now centralized within Oros, which has been very helpful for us to determine kind of paths forward, lessons learned and the like. And so it's been extremely helpful. Likewise, we've been able to centralize issue management. So I talked a bit earlier about how our back office was kind of stretched. Centralizing our issue management for everything from how we order PCs to how we onboard new employees has been very helpful for us and has been able to help prioritize kind of our limited resources in the back office. And then as we've grown and adding customers and partners, this new aspect of what we're doing, which is kind of using Oros to help us analyze kind of all the legal documentation and follow a very standard process for onboarding, has been extremely helpful in identifying gaps and developing, or at least an understanding of the inconsistencies that exist there, and helping us kind of work through all of those things in a very formulaic, very programmatic solution. So that's, again, I can't speak enough about how beneficial this has been for us. And I'm going to let Ed kind of talk next about kind of some of the, I guess, challenges and kind of forcing change within our business.
Thank you very much. Yeah, some of what I say might be a little bit of a repeat, but it's only to emphasize these points and things like that. So to get started, change can be frightening, but change can also be awesome. And if handled correctly, change can be transformative. So, that said, if your company has already committed to using Oros, like some of the larger clients we heard yesterday, great, good for you. Some of this may not be as valuable as it might be to some people who are considering Oros. So if you're part of that group, great. Maybe you'll benefit from some of what I'm about to say. So that said, let's take a closer look at using Oros to introduce a change. Again, a little bit of what Mike said here, I'm going to reiterate, but having supported Oros for one of our customers, we thought, I wonder if we would benefit from using Oros at Sandalwood. We obviously answered yes, and we decided to give it a shot for what we call project realization. So for those of us at Sandalwood, this is a long-standing documented process. It's well-defined, detailing how we deliver our services to our clients. And I myself, I've been with Sandalwood 20 plus years, and we've followed this process for as long as I can remember. The process is, in fact, so much a part of who we are that we recently established accountability metrics around process compliance. Included in our accountability measures are artifacts such as proposals, POs, evidence of required meetings, issue tracking, etc. Now, our current process, kind of like Mike mentioned, it does allow for some flexibility when it comes to capturing knowledge. We have options to use the Microsoft Office suite of tools. We have people choosing to use things like PowerPoint, Excel, OneNote, etc. And when it comes to file storage, we utilize things like shared drive, SharePoint, Microsoft Teams, and OneDrive. And as a result, this brings variability to how each of our lines of business choose to comply with our process. And while flexibility is convenient, it may not be sustainable. As Mike mentioned, steady growth at Sandalwood required us to look inward and examine our internal processes as we work to support a company that's now much larger than when we first created this process. So with an eye on the future, we reviewed the current state and realized that we could, in fact, improve our process. So reviewing a tool like Oros, we identified an opportunity to commonize and have a universal for Sandalwood process across all three lines of business. And this works across the 3 countries that we operate in North America. We could also harmonize conformance and accountability for these lines of business, as well as simplifying data entry for our users and realizing a dramatic improvement for our compliance auditor. So doing these things will transform our project realization process and ensure a more robust future. Now, taking a generic look at some of the potential challenges you may encounter when you attempt to introduce a change, we find ourselves dealing with resistance. Of course, everybody knows the old saying, right? Nobody wants to change. Well, why is this? People tend to resist change because they develop bad habits, or maybe not bad, but just habits, simply habits. They can also be skeptical. They can have a negative attitude. They may prefer the path of least resistance. And maybe they don't want to have to learn something new. In addition, it's entirely possible that changes will have a negative impact on your workplace culture. Also, not having processes in place can lead to chaos. And finally, there will need to be an investment of time and money to introduce change. Often you'll have one or the other, but not both. And in this case, it's best if you have both. So let me take a little break here and just kind of refer to some of the stuff that we talked about yesterday or others talked about. For instance, in the forum discussion, we heard about the executive sponsorship versus a grassroots approach to introducing Oros. And when I looked at how we are doing things at Sandalwood, I would say that we kind of used a hybrid approach. And the reason for that is our culture has always been one of collaboration. We consistently work together to problem solve and implement solutions internally and externally for our clients. So I think we took a grassroots approach to developing the tool with the goal of one day achieving executive sponsorship, and we're getting very, very close to that right now. So before I continue, let me share some highlights from our journey. We did start this process with a core team at Sandalwood. We were supported by a small team from AurosKS to develop a seed project. We started down one path, exploring the use of method K-packs, and there was a presentation on that yesterday. We really thought that approach was going to align best with our current process. Well, having constructed it, looked at it for a little while, thought about it, we eventually realized that that may not, in fact, be the best approach. So we ended up taking more of an assessment controls approach, and now that's working much better. Once we had things in order, we then kicked off a small user group to work with the new process in Oros and then provide feedback. Fast forward to this week, and now we have a steering committee in place to document our plan to help us orchestrate the development process and also eventually roll out as many processes as we can as we develop them in Oros. What I'll show you next is a somewhat generic approach to implementing change, but this does align with our plan to introduce Oros to Sandalwood. So whether you have the executive sponsorship or maybe you're taking a grassroots approach, you may want to address some of the following. Begin by preparing everyone through early engagement in the process, and then solicit feedback throughout. If you can act upon feedback, that enhances engagement and can also provide a sense of ownership. Make sure to communicate with a positive attitude and explain the benefits of the planned change. Then plan for the change, communicate the vision and the associated timing. As far as implementing the change, have an implementation plan. And as much as possible, embed the change into process to avoid unnecessary chaos. Align with current processes if you have them. Make sure to review the change and analyze the results. If you monitor this consistently to gauge level of success and identify gaps, it can be very beneficial. And finally, continuously improve. Adjust as necessary to accommodate user and corporate wants and needs. So I guess, that said, in summary, we're still at the beginning stages, as we pointed out. But we have determined that change will, in fact, be awesome. We're excited about the future of knowledge management at Sandalwood and ready to really kick it into high gear and continue this journey. So with that, let me go ahead and hand off to Bodhi Zangline, who's going to share some highlights from his experience simultaneously supporting Oros for his client and also for Sandalwood. So thank you.
Thanks, Ed. Like Ed just mentioned, I support a client as an overall administrator and Sandalwood at the same time. I kind of wanted to refer back to the Knowledge Aware Leader Forum yesterday. There was a lot of, I guess I'll kind of phrase it as life cycle development from going to a small user group to a larger user group. And what's interesting about my role, and I think I'm kind of unique in my role supporting a client and at my own company, is I see both of them at the same time. The client I support is an early user of Auros and has very developed workflows, very developed, detailed support documents, established roles, processes, and procedures, even a governance committee that meets to determine, high-level decisions about Auros and how it's applied and used. Through that, I've learned some best practices and some lessons learned also through the many subject matter experts on the client site. So having such a broad user base and having so many different workflows, I've learned very quickly from the admin perspective. So fast forward to Sandalwood's usage of Oros. The number one thing was it's new. It's a brand new application, brand new tool, and all the workflows that we've done, like Mike and Ed mentioned, we were doing some process. We were getting work done, but it wasn't really a standard process. It wasn't really clearly defined, and getting that and putting those concepts, those processes and procedures in Oros had a challenge in the beginning. The functions and features are brand new to the Sandalwood users, which was really interesting. Just the concept of a K-pack or extended element, which we all know now is kind of common language, but getting that common language understood and being able to speak that common language was a little bit of a learning process. The client structure I used to guide us in some of the early stages also. Instead of reinventing the wheel, I just said, this is what I know. Can we try to implement this? Does this make sense? Does this work? And that sped us along in some of the processes. One of the things that I realized was our first workflow, our very first community of practice that we developed, took a considerable amount of time. The second one developed a lot quicker. And I just see it going now that we have that common language, we understand Oros better. As a group, we can say, this is what I want it to look like. And to Ed's point, instead of using method K-packs for a particular workflow, we ended up using assessments because we understand what assessments are. We understand the use case of method K-packs versus that line item assessment, and found that the line item assessment is a better approach. And I just see that things are getting, developing more. And we're kind of creating new workflows and communicating better and working more efficiently. And just, taking that learning from the client history and adapting it to Sandalwood, I think has been a great benefit. So next slide, please. So one of the things that's interesting about the Sandalwood kind of being situation that we're in now is we're kind of underdeveloped development. We're learning as we go. Um, it's since we have kind of a smaller user group and changes are less impactful. um, we can get one of the benefits is we get the updated versions a lot more quickly and easily implemented, and it might take just like an hour session of this is what the new functions are, excuse me, the new functions are and features, and we can just hit the ground running and continue with that new version. Also, we're able to experience new functions pretty easily. We actually have the document ingester enabled in Sandalwood. The client does not right now, the client I work with. Um, but what that allows me to do is to see new features, new functions without a large impact to the broader user group. Steve was kind enough to give us a kind of a tutorial demonstration, and then of course yesterday's presentation was great. Reinforced how the document ingester works, when it works, when it doesn't work, that sort of thing. And because we're in that developmental stage, we have informal processes. It allows us to experiment, to try new things without having a large impact. We've tried some stuff and it didn't work. We tried a different approach. It did work. We said, okay, this is the way we're going to go going forward. And we're kind of learning as we go and refining our approach and how we implement Oros. I just wanted to say that working with the client, working with AurosKS and my fellow my coworkers at Sandalwood has been a great experience. I am thrilled to be working with Oros. It is a daily learning journey. I was kind of thinking about that this morning, that I feel like some days I think, yeah, I got it figured out. And then I'll ask a question and it'll open up a whole new concept of learning. And it is just, this is exactly where I want to be. I'm thrilled to be working with Oros. It is, I enjoy, supporting the client. I was very, very happy when Sandalwood started implementing Oros. And like I said, it's a daily learning journey, and I'm just thrilled to be where I am. So that's pretty much all I have. I guess Ed, I'll bring it back to you if there's any questions or.
Yeah, I think Mike, did you want to handle this one?
Yeah, I just want to summarize. Again, I think our team has talked about how great it's been for us. Again, we're very new and very much novices to this journey, but it has made us better, right? The visualization has helped us tremendously. Like, people cannot improve what they cannot see. People cannot assist what they cannot see. So that visualization has helped. All of the things that Oros has helped us do has kind of helped us grow together as a business, which is actually very surprising, because during COVID, we were very much apart, operating very much independently. And this effort has really kind of driven us to work together, to be more collaborative, to look for ways to simplify the way we do our business, and to look at ways to maybe help each other, right, as part of this process. So that's really kind of all we have. Does anyone have any questions for us? I see there's some in the chat, but we can go through that. So.
Yeah, thank you so much. And we do have a question. Jo Beth has a great comment too. We'll put that up in a second. Let's go to the question first. So Jasmine asks, what features in Oros do you use to build your accountability metrics?
Yeah, specifically, we added each of those items as an assessment checklist item, and we're able to then go in, determine whether it's a yes, no, not applicable, things like that. So it allows us to take a very quick peek into how we're doing against the items that we're required to document.
We use boards too, right?
Boards, you were asking? Did you hear that, Ed? Or?
Yeah, the team boards.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we're getting into using team boards now. Yes.
Good. Yeah, Jo Beth has a comment, and you guys might want to take a look. She says, I love to hear how much Oros has already helped your business, and it sounds like it was a perfect fit. Wishing you success as you grow the use case and footprint in the software.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you.
Thanks.
Yeah, like Bodhi said, ongoing learning, right? Yeah, and that's the theme that I'm getting from this conference. And I love how there's the collaboration for you're getting ideas from each other and trying new things. It's inspiring to see that.
Yeah, that's something I realized during the forum yesterday, is just going from beginning the business and developing it. And it's kind of interesting because like I said, I see that all at once instead of starting and seeing where we're going to be. And that's kind of helped me guide or make suggestions and say, this is where we could be in 3 years, 5 years.
Well, and I think, yeah, so many of the presentations that we've seen so far are centered around manufacturing and manufacturing process and data and specifications and requirements and things like that. And we've got a little different approach, but we have still found considerable value in using the tool.
Perfect. We did have one other question pop in. Are features like POs and other procurement related items only used from an artifacts perspective or for workflow too?
Yeah, we had to kind of separate things a little bit because of, access to Oros and the files, one thing and another. But yeah, in terms of our accountability metrics, we're using the fact that we have the PO and documented evidence of the PO. But a lot of that other stuff happens in other systems.
I think what Oros did allow us to do though too was that we had created a large SharePoint systems to support some of these things. The ability to share information or maybe to kind of hide information from specific groups or not share that was not enabled through SharePoint, but Oros has allowed us to create these communities of practice around areas where we want to share the information, especially customer information or internal information, and it's been very helpful, right? So it's got a lot more usefulness than a typical SharePoint solution. So.
Yeah, and just to be clear on the comment I made, we have a separate system where we manage, the accounting side of the business and things like the actual purchase orders and the accounting side of that. But having the evidence that we actually received a PO, that's what we're documenting within Oros.
Yeah.
Great. Yeah, we're throwing up one last question here from Tim Glau. Clients of Sandalwood making use of AurosKS versus not using AurosKS? What's the level of impact with implementing your client support solutions? If the client has AurosKS, does it make things easier for working on projects?
I think that'd be me.
Okay.
Yeah. Pretty much what happens is kind of what I try to express was the larger the user group, the more impact a small change can make. And that's where governance is vital. Sandalwood is developing that. I believe we kind of refer to it as the steering committee. We're at the point now where we need to start making some decisions that, could potentially impact the long term. Which I think is great because one of the things I found is that these small things can, end up, the more the separate business groups get together and share that information, if it conflicts, that can be a problem. And I've seen that in the larger user group. So is that kind of helpful?
Yeah, I think to add to that, Bodhi, what I got from that question was, are we finding benefits that we can realize on our client side? And I think absolutely, yes. Some of the work that we've done to create our processes with Sandalwood process has allowed us to go back to our existing clients and say, hey, by the way, did you know you could use Oros for this? Mm-hmm. And we've been able to expand upon some of that stuff just based on our own use. Mm-hmm.
Great. Okay, well, we're going to take one more question if you guys are okay with that, simply because it's going into break time, but we have that time. So this one just popped in. I understand you use Oros to ensure and document consistent processes. Do you use it to manage timelines and team workload and workflows too?
We're going to try to, yes. By that, I think it's specific to the implementation of Oros at Sandalwood. We're going to put together a list of all the processes that we want to go after. And then we're going to prioritize that list. We're going to set timing to that list. And we're going to use Oros to track our progress from start to finish.
Perfect. And that's a great place to end, I think. So thank you very much for sharing your experience. I know we all got a lot of value out of that.